I'm Rob. It's great to be here. I've lived in Birmingham all of my life, so I really don't know much about this area. You know, this is foreign territory for me. Coming out here, I'm married to Hayley. We have two really grown-up kids now that have got partners, and yes, we've got our first grandchild, and we've had him for a year now, so it's fantastic. I used to pastor a church in a unique area of Birmingham called California. It sounds fantastic, but it's not full of palm trees or anything like that. And believe me, the weather today is much better than where it was by us. I was brought up in a Christian home. Look, if somebody asked me the date I was saved, it would be so difficult to say, because I think sort of like I felt so many times I've put my hands up and go, yes, Lord, today's the day, or yes, Lord, today's the day. Or so I like to sort of like coin a term of the day that I kind of woke up to God, because to be honest, I've been coming to church since I've been in my mother's womb. It's been that kind of long, and yeah, one day I kind of woke up to Jesus and made this faith my own faith. So I've always been involved in church. I can't think of a date or a time when I haven't been to church. I really can't. Oh, apart from maybe a couple of years in my life when my dad thought, because he was a Methodist lay preacher, and he thought, oh man, they're not teaching him enough at that church or at that Sunday school, so I'm going to take him out for 2 years. Yeah, what a wonderful time that was. So I want to really sort of like tell you about probably the most important lesson that I've learned in my life. But to do that, I need to tell you about my life. So there's going to be a lot of story in today. I will get to some Bible, honest. But to be honest with you, a lot of us have heard the stories, we've had the teachings inside out, and what we really need to know is how we practically apply some of this stuff. I don't know about you, but sort of like life's not easy and simple, and sometimes it doesn't reflect what's there in the Bible so simply, and I have to translate it into where I am living here and now. So I just want to tell you a bit about my story. So I'm going to rewind many years ago when dinosaurs crossed this planet. No. When I left kind of university, I studied software engineering, so it's the farthest thing you can imagine from talking to people. You know, I used to talk to machines. I felt a lot more comfortable with that. And so I was a software engineer, and I got into it just as like the industry was taking off. You know, I remember the days when computers were the size of this room. I'm not joking, I programmed them. You know, so things have moved on quite a bit then. But I obviously got into that career when it was, you know, before it really started to take off. So I was very successful at it. I love my job. I love my work. It was something I really lived to do. But I also love God, and I also love the church. And at times there was conflict between those two things. So to be honest with you, I plowed as much time as I could into my workplace, and also into my God life and into the church. I plowed so much into those. And in many ways back then, things were very rosy in the garden. The future was bright. The future was great that was out there. I'd had a fantastic job, a wonderful wife. We married early on in life, and we loved the Lord, and we loved serving in the local church, and we had our first child, and the second one was on the way. And that's when life started to take a slight interesting turn for us. We'd been involved in church life and leading kind of church stuff since our early 20s, Hayley and I. And we'd spent loads and loads of time doing many different things in church life. But one of the big things we did was start to bring up a youth group and build a youth group up. And we got it up to 60 teenagers or so at the time, 50, 60 teenagers. And, and we just had 10 of them saved, which was a big proportion of what was going on at the time. And I was leading worship in church too. I play keys and that kind of thing. And because of both of those things, we were just so heavily involved in Christmas, it was like mind-blowing. sort of like I was playing, doing youth stuff, setting up the production for Christmas, as always happens. Because actually, whether you're a Christian or not, Christmas is a busy time, isn't it? It just goes mental, the season does there. As well as trying to hold down this career that was taking off. You know, I'd be flying to Scotland every week or so at that time. It was quite frequent. And then there was other opportunities coming up around the world. So it was a full-on job. And shortly, just after Christmas, like we all do, we start to get the flu, don't we? We start to get the aches and the kind of like colds that's going on. And actually, around Christmas time, we're thinking, can I make it through Christmas Day without infecting everybody and have a really good time with the family? You know, can I just make it through that? And I remember feeling that. And then just shortly into the new year, those symptoms, although those went away, I was just feeling so incredibly tired and exhausted. And I was sleeping more and more and more. In fact, I was sleeping about 20 hours a day, something like that, something ridiculous, about 20 hours a day. And I was struggling to get out of bed at all, never mind go to work or do anything else. I couldn't think clearly. I'd been to the doctors couldn't find anything. They sent me to specialists for tests. They couldn't find anything. And then they sent me for more tests. And I'd been off work for weeks. And in that fast-paced moving industry, it gets difficult. In fact, I remember this sort of like, they're saying, oh, why don't you use the private health scheme? Why don't you get alternative doctors' views? So, yeah, they was wanting me to have second opinions as to what was going on. And one of the doctors I was seeing had just read some research at that time about this new upcoming thing called yuppie flu. You know, which we all know now is chronic fatigue or ME. And so I was the original yuppie. I had the yuppie flu. I can vouch for that. And, you know, when I was awake at that time, I was feeling absolutely devastated. I got this career that was taking off. Things were going well in the church. People were getting saved. I wasn't pleased. And I think, frankly, if I'd got the energy, I'd have been angry if I'd got the energy. What was happening to me? What was happening to us? What on earth was God up to in this? It's great having all the teaching, but when you're lying on your back, what does it mean? We hear about sort of like God's amazing provision and how he heals people and how he restores people. And as far as I knew, I got everything sorted. I was playing the holy keys. And yet, now I'm ill on my back. A successful career going down the pan. Really, really frustrated. I remember sort of like lying there and our son Dan just crawling over me, and I wasn't able to look after the kids. And the question kept on coming up in my mind, why would God allow this? What on earth is going on? I am so frustrated. Didn't I serve well? Didn't I lead worship well? Then the question comes, doesn't it? What have I done wrong? What have I done to offend you, God? And it went over and over in my mind, along with the questions of, why me? Why now? We've heard about God's perfect timing. That didn't feel like it. Not at all. And you know, there's loads of people with great intentions out there, aren't there? They're really, great intentions, but they're not so good, really. If I can be honest, not so good. I lost count of how many people wanted to come and pray for me. In fact, I got sick of being prayed for. Yeah? You feeling me, some of you guys? It's like that, isn't it? No change. We were desperate. So desperate, weren't we, hon? People used to try and lift me into a car and take me to the next meeting to be prayed for, the next big speaker to be prayed for, anything. Guess what? Nothing. Zero. Zilch. Still no change. And then those kind, loving people with good intentions tried to explain why I wasn't getting healed. Don't you just love them? You haven't got enough faith. Thanks a bunch! Just what I needed to hear. It's a plot of the devil. I don't know about you, but my God's a big God. Can't he overcome this stuff? So I wasn't sort of buying that one either, to be honest. And I remember getting so bored, so frustrated, so caught up in my own thoughts. I couldn't provide for my family. You know, I'd always been taught from birth that was my role. I had to, first of all, provide for my family. And I could see the money, that curve of money falling off the cliff. I could see the career going. I could see the church going. I could see it all going. And actually, my faith was tracking in that same direction. I'm just being honest with you. Is that okay? Yeah. And then, one day, I was lying in bed. I couldn't do anything else by that point. You know, there's only so much TV you can watch. There's only so many books you can read. And there's only so many endless worship tapes you can listen to. And it was tapes back then that you can listen to. And I was just lying there and I couldn't take any more. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but you know, sometimes you get in this kind of space and it suddenly goes extra silent, extra quiet. It's like the silence pervades the room or enters the atmosphere that's there. And this kind of happened as I was lying there on my bed, and there was just this immense kind of peace and silence. You know when that silence seems extra silent? That's about the best way I can describe it. And then a thought came into my mind, and it's definitely not the way that I think. So I concluded, perhaps it's God speaking. I mean, it'd been so quiet over several months. And I concluded, perhaps this is you, God. And the voice said this. Such comforting words came from the Lord. Why are you whining? Why are you whining? Thanks, Lord. Thanks, Lord. And he simply followed it by this statement. He said, do you realize that you would not even take your next breath unless I allowed it? You won't take your next breath unless I allow it. Wow. That couldn't be the Lord, could it? Could that be the Lord? He wouldn't say such things, would he? Would he? Would he say such things? You wouldn't take your next breath if it wasn't for me. Surely it'd be much kinder than that. A bit more loving than that. But it was him. And to be honest with you, it wasn't until much later that I realized how kind the Lord was being to me. How gracious he was being to me at that time. You see, my mindset had all been wrong. And for many of us, even in this room now, our mindsets are still that way. Our paradigm, how we read the world, how we view it, how we see our lives, how we even see our relationships with the Lord is wrong. We've got the wrong picture that's there. I'd been brought up, so much of this is about our upbringing too. I'd been brought up to be self-sufficient. You know, my mum had started a successful business. My dad had started 5 successful businesses. So imagine the sort of like expectation on me. Yeah? To be self-made, to be a successful family. And you see, secretly what had happened in that, my identity and my role and who I was had been formed in that. I had adopted that way of thinking and carried that into my Christian beliefs. I was going to make it in life. I was going to have the perfect family. I was going to have the best job that's out there. I was going to have all that and yet still be the perfect Christian. I was going to finance the church. Why else would God give me a fantastic job? I was going to worship lead with the best of them. Hey, we'd already started building a great youth group. The future was bright. We were going to have a brilliant, fantastic, growing church, and I was going to be the pastor of it. What an idiot I was. You see, I'd assumed totally the wrong identity. And this is the secret I want to tell you about today. Because God said to me, if it wasn't for me, you will not be taking your next breath. What I assumed was that I knew best, that I knew how to do things. I'd calculated it. I'd worked it out. I'd formed the plan. I knew what was going to happen. I'd got the program out there. I knew what God's will and purpose was for my life. I knew that, yes. Do you notice all the I's? All the I's in that? It was all about doing and not about being. Get that one. Let that sink in. Just take a moment. It was all about being. It's all about doing and not about being. I knew Jesus. I knew him well. Did I hang around him? Did I know him intimately? No. I'd equated pleasing God with doing. And actually, I'd even got that wrong because really I was pleasing myself. Really, I was pleasing myself. And my identity had become in what I was doing rather than what I did for Jesus. My identity should have been in being known as a loving, being loved as a child of God. Not for what I do. Just being happy with that fact. And when everything is stripped back and taken away from you, you don't realize it till that point. I didn't realize it to that point. John 15 says this, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you. Here's the key one. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. You can have all the skills in the world. You can have all the get up and go in the world. But unless you have that intimate relationship with the Father, forget it. Forget it. So that's my vital life lesson that I learnt that day. It's what Paul says in the book of Acts, Acts 17 verse 28, when he says, it's in him I live and move and have my being. It's in him. In him. In him. In. So all of our doing needs to come out of our being. All of our doing needs to come out of our being. Whether that's secular work, church work, it doesn't matter what it is. Family life, raising kids, I don't care what it is. It has to come out of an intimate relationship with the Father. Has to come out of our intimate relationship with him. And it's such an important principle that we have to grasp, that God scattered it totally throughout his word. Yeah. You can't miss it. We sung a song about it this morning, didn't we? Sort of like that famous verse in Matthew 6, verse 33. Seek first the kingdom of God and all these things will be added to you. Yeah, we're not so quick about quoting the bit that's a bit earlier than that in verse 6, are we? The place is the intimate place, but when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. spend time in the secret place. Spend time in the secret place. We have a backstage and we have a front stage in our lives. Rehearse everything on the backstage with the Father. And then what comes out on the front stage will be perfect. It'll be great. It'll be amazing what happens there. It won't kill you. It won't drag you down. It won't destroy you. Make sure the backstage is working with the Father. Make sure the backstage is working with the Father. So the lesson that I learned on that day, on that bed, is the most important lesson I've learned in my life. I am loved by God simply because he loves me. Yes. Not because of anything I do or say. He loves me because he loves me because he loves me. Whether I do anything or not, if I was to sit there for the rest of this meeting, doesn't matter. He loves me. He loves me because he loves me. And I began to understand that day that I was so broken that I couldn't do stuff on my own. And it's important that we realize our brokenness, that everything has to be done in and through him and with partnership with him. We are in partnership with the Father. By his grace and by his mercy, he chose us to do his works through us. Why? So that others can see that. You're the billboard for God. You're the only way some people are only ever going to see Jesus. So you better be sure that you have that relationship in you so others can see it. That it's not just taking on what you're told or a set of practices that you've learned. Know that relationship with the Father. Know that relationship for the Father. 2 Timothy 1 verse 9 in the Amplified puts it like this. For he delivered us and saved us and called us with a holy calling. A calling that leads to a consecrated life. A life that is set apart. A life of purpose. Not because of our works or because of any personal merit. We could do nothing to earn this. But because of his own purpose and grace, his amazing undeserved favor, his amazing undeserved favor, which was granted to us in Christ Jesus before the world began, eternal, ages ago. And I am just so grateful for what the Father showed me on that bed that day. That mercy and that grace and that kindness when he said, you're not going to even breathe unless I let you take that next breath, because he stopped me from being an idiot and wasting my life. It's not surprising, is it, that not long after that I was healed? And when I say healed, I mean far more than just physically. Something else happened deep inside. I was healed in totality with it. He made me whole. That wholeness that only comes from a restored intimacy with the Father. If you like, he sozoed me. You know that Greek word, sozo? To save, to heal, and to deliver? The one where we replaced in the English kind of like translations of the Bible with either saved, healed, or delivered, when it really means all the three together. He did that to me. It's a complete package what God does. So he sozoed me. He rescued me. He gave me his shalom. And when I say shalom, I mean sort of like not just kind of that peace as we know it to be, but its root that comes out of completeness. He made me complete. He completes me. And guess what? He wants that for every single one here. Every single one. Actually, he wants it for the entirety of his creation. That's what he longs for. That's why he sent his Spirit here as well. You know, I keep on revisiting that lesson. I'd be a liar to say that I've got it all under my belt, because I haven't. I keep on revisiting that lesson. And now and again, I go through a bit of an identity issue or crisis. But I go back to that point of that day when God showed me his kindness. I keep on revisiting that point. You know, When I went from being a software engineer to a pastor, when the Lord said, would you put that amazing career down and would you look after people instead of machines? I remembered that day on my bed, and I knew it was going to be okay, even when the finance wasn't guaranteed. Guess why? Because he loves me, because he loves me, because he loves me. He just loves me. So it's going to be okay because he loves me. Because he loves me. And more recently, August last year, the Lord asked Hayley and I to lay down the leadership of the church. And you know, that was a pretty big one. We'd already given up secular career. You know, now he's asking us to give up a church. Which is another big identity thing. Boy, did I go through an identity wobble on that one. Who really am I? You know, I'd like to say, I'd got it all sorted out, but I hadn't. I was totally in pieces of it. And God kept on waking me up in the night. And guess the words he was saying? I think you probably know. I love you. You know, for the first few weeks, I was so desperate. I was going, Lord, that's great, but what next? Can I have a bit more? Can you flesh it out a bit? You know what? Today, months later, almost a year later, he's still doing the same thing. He's just saying, I love you. And so I've got this canny thing. I've survived a year now. I think I'll probably survive the rest of my life on that kind of statement, because it's more important than anything else. I love you. I love you. He loves me. He loves me. He's never shortchanged me, and the next step in my life has always been better than the last. Always been better than the last. And I want to wind up with just one story. I've got about 3 minutes left, so hopefully I can fit it in.
Or go a bit longer.
Or go a bit longer. Or go a bit longer. It's a story. Somebody I remember. I started going to a really early prayer meeting in Birmingham with some young guys, and this young guy is about 19, and he told this story, and I just want to iterate it. He said, you know, it was quite funny. He said, when I was young, you know, his family changed the hairdressers, which I just found an interesting statement to start with, because you know, I think I could probably be his grandpa now as well. He said anyway, his family decided they wanted to change the hairdressers they was going to. You know, I wouldn't know much about that, but they were going to change the hairdressers. And for a young lad, the hairstyle, especially where he was, is pretty important. All right? So he whinges and he moans like crazy at his parents, going, why have we got to change the hairdresser? What's wrong with the old one? Why do I need to do this? Why do we all need to do it? I mean, the reality was they were too expensive. But anyway, he was... so he's complaining like this, and his complaining went on and on and on. So when his brothers and his dad had to go to the hairdressers, they used to go as a family. I mean, I can only imagine them. Perhaps the hair was kind of long at a certain time, and they all went together. I don't know. It's just the way my brain works. But anyway, so they go out the door, and his head's down, and he's whinging all the way. What have we got to go to this hairdresser's? What was wrong with the last one? I don't mind. Actually, you can use my pocket money. I can go and pay for my own hair. There's nothing wrong with it. And he's whinging like crazy all the way, head down, until he gets into the barber shop. Can you imagine the surprise and the look on his face when he suddenly realised, right, he'd actually gone with the wrong family. He'd lost his dad on the way. He lost his dad on the way. Today, keep that intimate relationship with Father. Don't lose your dad on the way. Thanks, Ian.